Still the crickets. And it's not getting any better. It's all because we're not stepping up. See, you'd think somebody running through the Twitter, and finally maybe my day has come. This is America. Do something. Enough is enough. As I've said for years, a target-rich environment, step in. Don't worry about it, step in. But I'm asking you to do it a little bit more intelligently than what I've seen in the past. And that's a pretty multi-decadal path, so that's not coming with just the last week's view of the Internet. In fact, a lot of your research shouldn't really be on the Internet unless it's from source documents. And I have no problem with directing you to governmental source documents or agency source documents or NGO source documents, because they're telling you what's up, and that gives you the clues on how you get around what they're doing. So, for those of you in any aftercast anywhere, now and into the future, is BTWRLM 330. Maybe this is a special one. I don't know. 330. That'll get you hopefully get you closer to maybe the content in the future if it's ever still posted. Production note, I don't know why we disconnected last week. I still haven't found out why. I was able to tune up my adapter. I think I'm getting a throughput that's maybe 30 to 50% better, but that doesn't answer why I disconnected a bunch of times last week. So again, I'll try and get on as quickly as possible when I notice. I appreciate the heads up. I use the RLM chat room because that's where the network is connected, and that's the only one that I actually have running. I actually don't monitor it too much. It just distracts from my abilities to keep up. Again, the context is lost on the Internet, so I'm just not the guy to contact to deal with a bunch of chat rooms. So I appreciate that you're all chatting amongst yourself. It's encouraging to watch people working together and working through if you can. And again, taking what I say as lead and move on with what you find for yourself. It is something that you'll choose and something that you'll have to work through on your own, and you'll find as you go that you do. And a couple of comments as of last week are saying just that. And as I've told you before, you'll find even more than what I'm talking about. You'll find more specificity to what I'm telling you, and it actually becomes even a clearer path than maybe it sounds like when I'm talking, as fast as I might be talking, as fast as it is hard to keep up. My problem is I can't tell you all the reading I've done that allows me to tell you what I'm thinking, and you end up going and finding that out. So again, it's just try to show you how to go about doing this thing that we're finally seeing the truth of it all. It's not just statements or memes. There's a real problem in organized things that decide that they have more authority than you do. And in fact, at least for the United States of America, in the concepting of it, it really isn't that way. The people really do have a power. It's just that they've either lost that, or they've forgotten it, or they're just too apathetic to wield it. I mean, without getting too much into you're seeing a bunch of killings going on. Well, every day people die, the gun things over at the Walmarts and all that, another thing. I'm just blown away, especially in the last one in not the last one, but the one in Texas. Where were all the security guards? I meant to comment to the Twitter, why didn't the security clean up the aisle the guy came in on? When the store can't clean up the aisle, then you have a problem. And this is getting to a point where I hope people will step up, especially in Texas, where you all want to talk about don't mess with Texas. This is coming down to where public places require private protection for yourself. But until you rally up and go right back to your governments and tell them you will make ordinances that you can't forbid gun possession for my self-defense because the cops have failed to protect us. They can't. They're just history takers. The companies themselves that preclude our business, preclude our defense, can't keep up with it. So I'm telling you how to look at this a little differently here. When the so-called authority, the property owner, can't protect you and won't, and the people that are the government can't protect you and won't in the moment, that brings your reason, your necessity, up against whatever authority they think that they can bring to you. Now, there's going to be a contention, just don't shop there. Yeah, go ahead, just don't shop there. That's the first thing. But when you have a society generally that's attacking itself, for whatever reason, I'm not going to go into all the reasons why people are so triggered anymore. We talk about it behind Woodshed all the time. There's no proof of just necessarily any one thing. It's just everything. And so that's not going to give us an answer until bunches of us jump into those plots. But we just have a response to be doing through threats that are now pervasive. We better take responsibility, and we better stop being talked out of our ability to do so. And I am talking about the so-called Second Amendment, although it's not really that at all. It's your right to bear the arm that's sufficient to put down the threat. And we've lost that in every capacity, not just a firearm, so-called. Firearm is a very particularly commercialized term as well. It doesn't say firearm in the Constitution. At any rate, we go on and on and on. If you get the point of the subtlety here about how they've done it to us, then you understand, and some of you are good at that. Another thing I want to address, actually a couple people. It's funny how you guys come in little groups to recognition. It's really nice to see. You get a sense of what I'm saying. You can't quite put your finger on, like last week I was talking about how I would be responding in this condition that we find in the so-called TSA, and how to come to the mentality that you bring when you have to address that. Some of you are responding that you're getting a sense of what that is. There's that. I want to confirm that it's not just what I'm saying, certainly. You have to be fluid in the moment, but there's a sense of how you approach this that you'll gain. And how will you gain it? You'll read more stuff. You'll read more of the objective basis that the military government, the buffoons, kakistocracy, whatever you want to put on them, whatever they're doing to diminish us and oppress us, you'll read how they're supposed to respond, and that gives you your guidance on how and where you're going to form your question. You'll corral them that way it's not physical. You'll be doing it on the record. In fact, I was thinking, now again, this is all just suggestions to think, and in the fluid moment, that phone thing being there, I know lots of people can use their thumbs. They're actually getting pretty thumb-dexterous, I guess, on these phones. You could be using that as a record machine, if you will, and now they're going to want to take it. So my point is, one of the things is you build in the harms. You're using that to witness on the phone, record on the phone, witness, since they're going to take it anyway, and maybe you weren't too smart enough to get rid of every information. You should have. You should still have the capacity to use it. It's a recording machine. So you should have it on, you should have it recording, and you should be working with the text, and best as you can taking down the text. Now, what is the point about all that? This is a setup for the future. It's okay. They're going to take it anyway, but what have you done? When you're witness, you move from the investigative reporter. If some of you have been really paying attention, you're the investigative reporter, but what does that make you? That makes you a witness to an ongoing what? If you set it up in the proper few seconds in the beginning, you've set it up as a witness to an ongoing crime. And as soon as they start messing with your stuff that you're using, and you probably can only use one at a time, that's the record, the witness written or copied that they're tampering with evidence. You're not going to be able to stop them. The point is, so you come up with a thing that they're going to have to interfere with you, which is another ability that you have. Once you establish as a crime and they take the thing that was the evidence, you can claim they're tampering with evidence. Now you've got something else. It doesn't mean it's going to stop them? No. But you can start building your list of things of all the violations they did. And when you get back to the idea and start to prove out for yourself that they're not supposed to do this to so-called American citizens, and I'll be very careful about Americans, keep that in the generic, people that were not supposed to be subjected, because it's supposed to be people coming in and offshore and not natural to the place, I guess, the country. Then you have them in this condition and crime using their color of authority as a felony. If you get that established very quickly, now if you're taking down notes or using the camera as a recording, you're a witness, not just the investigative reporter. You've got two hats that you start to wear here. And so I got off point, but I want to add this. You're starting to sense that there's something more to this. There's a general trend of how you get at this stuff, and it's just sitting in your psyche. I want to reinforce that. That's exactly part of what's going on. There's stuff that starts generating out of inside of your head that is not planned, that you get a sense of how you have to go, and I'm asking you to start to pay attention to that and go with it. That will be part of the genius that starts to come out, and you don't parade this stuff. It's just what you're using as the tools and weapons that are coming to defend yourself, and maybe not so well in the beginning while they got you because they're brutes and bullies and they're criminals. But you will have hopefully this unending series of things that have done under the color of authority to interfere with the right you had, then interfere with your taking of evidence and witness of the investigative reporter and the witness that it's creating against the crime you've established. And if you start to understand this, you start standing on a stronger and stronger foundation, and you start pushing what they're doing back and back. And because when they attack you, you just say, well, if they want to take my stuff and they want to do the Fourth Amendment, they didn't have the right to tamper with my evidence, and my ability to gather evidence is the really other thing. See, it's like mining law. You not just have the right to make a claim, you have the right to acquire claims. So I have the right to acquire information. I have a right to acquire and record the witness. At any rate, so this is, where do I get all that? I just read it, folks. Just go read the court cases, go read the things that you have to do, go read the pertinent rights that come with all the rights. All the stuff that's not written in the Constitution that you still have rights to. That's what I'm talking about. You go read for those things. Not what someone makes up, what something that you can see happens, or what the system itself, the occupier, recognizes in these positions. Like I think we might get maybe today. We're going to get to a point where maybe we talk about, not to get too far off of this either, the Julian Assange thing. In a civil case, they were found, the press is pretty absolute. And so this is the point. I mean, you have the right to disseminate information, and certainly if it's public knowledge anyway. And so there's no shield, there's no protection. It's how are you responding to an aggression? Notwithstanding your peacefulness and you're just wanting to get through. How are you responding to an aggression under color of authority? And this seems to be one of the keys that I've found that seems to be universal at this point. And there's just not enough of you stepping up when you get a hit to really put that back on them. Some of you are, and you see how it changes. But again, I appreciate that you're thinking hard on these stuff. And it's coming to you that there's a whole other thing that comes with it. I keep telling you, you won't really know about this other side. There's just things that you sense are happening. And as you think through those, more responses come to you. And so let me move back into my tabs. Last week I got to 3 or something on all this. And I appreciate that you're appreciating some of how you work through this. And I try to make this as specific as I can in the general, and that's the problem. That's why I ask you to, if you have something real special, maybe contact me. And you find, when you read through, you'll find the stuff I say is there. I don't know what to say. I'm not here to tell stories, and I'm not here to tell you actually how to do it. I'm saying that there's a way that it looks like it works when we're oppressed, and not because we're stupid. I mean, we can make stupid things, stupid mistakes. I'm saying when you're just kind of going through life, and then there's this authority that steps up. How do we really address it? We're really outside of how to deal with that. And so over the last 3 decades, I've had to deal with that. Not because I went out, again, I guess it's a little bit of a warp for me, not because I wanted to prove I had a right to bear arms in the street and walk around free, so I did what you call the auditing thing now. No, I was involved in things that the government was coming against me, and it was wrong, and I could see it clearly written that it was wrong. And so I started to work hard to figure out what that was. That's really not a life to live. I get that. And I should be free not to do other things, but that's the problem. We're not actually. Now, we could la ourselves into believing that, and we can go along, and then in the future, maybe even skate out of it, not have too much trouble, or just take the lumpins they give us, and that's good enough. We could do all that. But it doesn't seem quite right here if we're going to have a bunch of people that are in positions of decision that they can, again, we want to call it be above the law. They aren't above the legal because they are the legal. They are what is legal. But the law is never really applied. And we never get there. And so I've looked at it and said, well, that's an alternative reality, like this alternative consensus alternatives. That's just another alternative that they get us to buy into. And this is where challenging authority the proper way, the more proper way, I guess I should say, the more proper way has been critical to get and understand. It just starts to separate you out, and these people aren't really that smart. They think they're smart. They think they have your line down, so they think they can anticipate you. And like I said, some of you auditors, they have that, and you didn't quite figure that part out. Judges will do this too on a more technical level. And so you have to understand how this game they play against us to get us to buy into it works. And then you can continue to be that mobile and fluid avoidance. I guess I can say best, the avoidance. So because you're not in it, you're not of it. You're about it, maybe, without getting too semantical on all this, but you start to get this idea in your mind, well, okay, this is a different way to look at this, and giving it a bit of consideration. Yeah, there's a way to keep them over there and you over here, and there's a chasm between you. And that's all you have. You can't walk in there all haughty like you got an answer, because these people literally are criminals. They don't want to agree to that, but they're criminals. They want to take their arrogant attitudes, but they're still criminals if you're not doing anything. You want to talk a lot here. Lots of people talk about non-aggression, and then I want to talk about what the no victim type thing. Yeah, when you're into those areas, consider what I'm saying. Consider what I'm saying to an extreme degree, because that's how you catch them. So you stop complaining about it and start catching them on it. And so I want to also now move on here. And a little note came by, I don't know, maybe last week, just to put a notice on to people that those of us that are working behind the scenes like we do, and maybe not so behind the scenes we have a broadcast, but people are working to do research, and I understand now he has gotten what he wanted, but there's one thing I noticed was left out, so I want to call it out here for y'all. If you can help, Clint Richardson he's starting to have a shift here, and he's got to get some stuff done, his next project, and so he asked for some donations to get some particular equipment and a computer and some software, and that request was made, but it was fulfilled very quickly. So thank you for those of you that did that for him. This is a hard thing, I understand, for him to do. You don't want to ask, we don't ask for much of anything, but in this case he realized that there was an obstruction. People donated funds to him. Well, now apparently he got enough in a very quick time, but I noticed one thing that he was asking for that didn't pop up in his response. You get the link, Reality Blogger at WordPress. You can go to his website there. He's talking about his new project, but I noticed he also needs something, and I'm going to ask people people bring a high caliber to this if they're going to go ask help, try to offer their help. He's also asking for editors on what he's doing, and I didn't know. I haven't talked with him at all. In fact, I sent a message back to try and mitigate some of the things he was talking about through another party who forwarded an information to him. But if he's asking for editors, maybe if those of you that can edit, whether it's grammatical or contextual or subject matter wise, I didn't notice he didn't say he got all the people that he needed. So though he says he doesn't now need the donations, which I think you need to pay attention to people who are earnest and focused and honest about what they do, attempting to bring information to people in a proper way. Keep your ears open to help them. In this case, he got a lot of people a lot of people did, but I noticed he didn't talk about the editors, that if you can do some editing, and I don't even know if this would be even editing for video or if it's the grammatical thing, but you might want to, if you have the knack for that and you want to contribute, maybe contact Clint Richardson at his Reality Blogger WordPress site. I suppose you can get there. You can continue to make donations even though he's asked that he's fulfilled his need. But I notice editors may be needed. Maybe those of you that can can contact him, and he can tell you what he might need in the context of non-monetary donations to get what sounds to be a pretty big project out. So I just wanted to advance that to my listeners. Those of you that are tuned in, if you can help, great. I appreciate that. I'm sure that what you did for him here now to get him back into a system that it can help him is beyond. So appreciate all that. But again, as this thing gets shooken out, Vince, you got to help me. Shooken? Is that what we're going to shooken out? You shake this thing out. We got to keep together somehow and keep supporting the people that are doing the work that bring us more of the truth or the factual foundation from which we'll make our decisions. And I think Clint's one of them. So. And like I said, we don't talk much, and I don't work with him. It just happens to be that's the way it works. So all I can do is kind of pass the word on as it was passed on to me. Another thing I want to bring up here is what we talk about behind the woodshed. I'm just kind of looking at what's going on. Oh boy! Again, to me, I don't even know what I'm looking at anymore. As far as why do we keep on regurgitating the same type of conditions without stopping any of this. Like I said today, the Twitter was, this is America, do something. Enough is enough, do something. I thought that was what I've been saying here. That's kind of like should have been a mantra I put up on my Twitters, and this morning I started to do that. That I told you a long time ago of things, and it's funny how what the people in government, whatever they want to put kudos on themselves or whatever, be calling stuff out that long since occurred and then are just kind of part of the memory hole. I always find it interesting that stuff pops up and people try to take credit for things that are long, and then who does it has always been a fascination. But things that they come out, people say, and you hear it and you keep moving, and nobody really resolves anything. And I don't know why, it just kind of strikes me. Some of these things strike me not deeply, but it's more than other things to even comment to you here. Rand Paul condemns budget deal, declares the Tea Party dead. Just the title, folks. And then who did it? It was pretty fascinating. I won't even read it. I was going to read more, but there's no reason to read it. That's Rand Paul condemns the budget deal, declares the Tea Party dead. Folks, I remember I told you years and years and years ago when they declared the Tea Party, that when the Tea Party had that big meeting over in Washington, D.C., and Dick Armey got in the way. Remember, he sat on the podium and he got in the way of however millions of people, a million people that showed up, whatever it was. It doesn't really matter. Gobs and gobs and gobs of people showed up at the steps of the Capitol. And Dick Armey put his little podium up there and he started speaking stuff, and he stopped everybody. What did I tell you? I said he stopped everybody that was there to go get something done from walking up the steps and going and occupying Congress. Didn't I tell you that years and years ago? I told you then that the Tea Party died. I find it amazing now that they want to even resurrect it to kill it, and that Rand Paul does it. Because this is, again, these non sequitur conditions that people buy into, make a point. And there's some of you that fell off the Tea Party thing or never got on it early on, but you had your own concept. The point is that we're at the point where we might walk to a place and we'll gather in protest, or we'll sit in our chairs in protest, and what we're looking at is deader than dead, and yet we'll give any time and air to it. It bothers me endlessly as I look around social media. But anyway, Rand Paul, the Tea Party was dead when it doesn't walk past Dick Armey's obstruction that was made and planned to be put there so that people wouldn't do the next step they ought to have, which is crawled up them steps and then occupied. Did you hear what I said? Occupied, not the Occupy movement. You sit in Congress until they fix stuff. Like what, folks? I mean, Patriot Act, like NDAA, like the TARP, all that stuff. We didn't do it as hundreds of thousands to millions of people. We did nothing. And yet they want to keep the ghost of the Tea Party going, and so many people have been tied into that. Well, now it takes someone, Rand Paul, in order to say it's dead. It didn't exist after that day, folks. Anybody who thought it existed, and we were dealing with people that were in those movement, the Tea Party. We tried to get people to understand what was going on through the mining district as well, explaining what that thing was. No one was interested at the time. They're not interested now. No, they'd rather get into the movement. They'd rather get into being told how the world is and how it really, without looking at it clearly, saying all that stuff is a setup. It's something for you to buy into, to put yourself in a box and have someone else declare it for you. And so, for those of you that were involved in the Tea Party, if you needed somebody else to tell you, well, I guess it's officially now the fact that Tea Party is dead because Rand Paul said so. Exclusive. FBI documents warn of conspiracy theories or new domestic terrorism threats. I found this lineage of discussion this week pretty interesting. The Tea Party was a terrorist threat at some point. Everything's a terrorist threat. It seems to me the FBI is the biggest terrorist threat in this country at this point. Now, it's everything now being turned back. You're now seeing everything. All the stinking onion layers are coming out. The FBI documents warn of conspiracy theories or new domestic threats. So I was surprised, or not surprised, I guess it's surprised only to see it come out. I was kind of I thought it was humorous to watch this story. The FBI also says the media got it wrong at the Garlic Festival shooters' white supremacy ideology despite the IG's post. Well, if you read through this story and you look at the previous one, that conspiracy theories are a domestic terrorism threat, and where'd you hear that? Not only anywhere else, but certainly behind the Woodshed. I've told you this is what's coming down. The Patriot Act told us this was happening. This is the other theme that went through this week. The Patriot Act has explained this condition since it was invoked the stupidity with which it was brought in so quickly and no one said anything. That's not the beginning. It's just the beginning for all y'all. And started taking notice and kind of focus. Remember, we keep talking behind the woodshed. This was just really implementing the prior oppressions, from which I continued beginning early on to tell you about your equal rights, your civil rights, those things that are exactions of every kind. This is from that time before. It's just now making it more certain. Remember the Trading with the Enemy Act. This was all part of that lineage. If you go to, again, the bottom line, go to your USC Title 50. Look very, very, very carefully, and you're going to find the supporting note for that is a banking act as well. I think it's 12 USC 95A. You'll see it's tucked inside there, but it's at the end. It's at the notes. So part of your the oppression is what people have said, but they say it without perfecting it and without moving anything against it. It is a fiscal slavery, part of it. But going back to this point here, the FBI documents warning conspiracy theories of a new domestic threat. So I've tried to explain to you as we've been moving through, do not do things and do not say things that can be pigeonholed into these conditions. Do not accept titles without properly responding and refuting, or doing an assertion of a challenge backwards on someone who tries to attach a title to you, because this is where we're going. They're going to attempt to marginalize everybody in these conditions. I don't know if you knew about the Garlic Festival. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. I'm not paying much time on these shootings. I think they're partly set up, and it's not that they're so set up necessarily. There could be no setup at all, but the setup is in society, is in the minds of people. It's in how they've been abused, all different ways. Maybe not even, there's so much now, I don't even know if we could actually do the causation of it. But like I said, nobody at these shooting events are protecting themselves. That's on us. And that's on us. Well, there's a law against doing that. Well, we'll go change. If that's the law and people are dying, it's a bad law. Let's go change it. So I've been telling you, you're going to have to be able to make laws that allow you to do the most simplest things to defend yourself, because the system is set up to attack you and cause you to attack each other. Now, the Garlic Festival shooting happened. There's been like 3 or 4 since the Garlic Festival already, which is still, we're going into some summertime thing here. Be careful as well. I don't dismiss them, but I put a little different thought on them all. And I pretty much put the responsibility on us. Like I said, if you found out that Walmart didn't, in the next one that happened, in El Paso, when Walmart security didn't clean up the aisle that guy came in with that guy, then you are no longer, you have noticed that they're not protecting you. You are now listing those things, those failures, those derelictions on their part to invite you on their property that allow you to be subject to these crimes, gives you the license to disregard their restraints if they're going to want to do business with you. In other words, they can privatize their business. Here's, I guess, the definition so that you don't lose this one. If they privatize their public exposure, then it's not actually public. But then if they don't privatize it, then you have, and you come right off the street, this is like this ingress and egress law. Then they don't have they're proving to you they can't protect you. The government does this all the time, but no one looks at it this way. So I'm off a point on that of trying to solve the problem. We're responsible for us dying in the stores that are publicly open. And let's see, how can I make a distinction on this? Walmart opens itself publicly, and I think Costco requires a membership. That's the distinction. If all these stores want to go to membership, and you want to be a part of a member of a store that allows someone to walk in and shoot you all, that's okay. But a publicly open place, right to the street, and you get to walk right in without restriction, that raises the obligation of the property owner. And I don't see how that property owner has the right to keep you to open the doors and create this threat to you. Maybe it'll take a couple lawsuits to stop that, but I would rather not have you do the lawsuit, because that's in the legal system. Just make a law that you have the right to protect yourself, because all of the failures of the owners, the business owners, the property owners, the government itself fails to protect you. This was the basic rule of the Second Amendment anyway. Now, I brought that up just now, but I wouldn't use the Second Amendment in my statement because it has to do with private protection. What states you live in that didn't allow you to privately protect yourself? I don't understand, y'all. But in places where you have open carry, well, I don't know what the question. Well, I guess most places that have it would have open carry. It's the one that have closed carry, but then you have to go get a permit. Now, for myself, just to tell you, I don't get out much. I really am stuck to where I do and study and resolve things. I don't do too much to get out and about. When I did, I always carried open. You wonder why? Well, because I saw this nonsense. Not that I'm afraid. Well, I guess I was really more concerned that if that happened and I didn't have where I had the right to carry it and I couldn't respond, I'd feel bad about it. I mean, I'd have a problem with not being able to resist. It's kind of like a fire. Why didn't I go run to put the fire out and save, do whatever I had to do, save people if they needed it? That's just inside me. That's may not be you. But I always open carried for the most part. Now, there's a rub when I had to go into downtown into the state building, right? The county building, that was always a rub. At the time, I didn't know so much. And right now, I don't necessarily have to go in. I just send in a letter, and I'm costing a little bit extra to go. It costs about the same as to travel down there. I send a letter that's return receipt requested and makes evidence. I just deal with things a little bit differently. It's more difficult. But hey, get back to the thing. All these conspiracy theories that the FBI now says is a threat to domestic terrorism is what I told you was coming. They're now making it outwardly done, but they're not equally applying it, which was certainly stated here when the FBI is reporting that the media got it wrong on the Garlic Festival to identify white supremacy ideology as part of the reason for why the kid went down. And just to touch that, even if you could find records. And it's funny, I just saw a picture, just as I was coming to broadcast, there's a picture, the three kids that were supposedly done it, with pictures, there's the three side by side, I could not tell you the difference. I mean, the three pictures, the people that were supposedly doing the last three so-called mass murders, I couldn't tell you the difference between the three. And so we got a main problem. But even regardless of the supremacy of how can anybody, even if that was the case, there's an Facebook facepalm post of white supremacy terminology manifestos. You see all the problems with those. But let's just say, how would you know that was the cause? When we have things like pharmaceuticals, we have things like psychiatrists, we have things like license, we have things like, well, just illicit chemistry. I'm talking mixables. We have all these things that are out there in the world. We have the question of epigenetic change happening real time because of your food and what they do to it. And not just what they give you in prescription, but the type of things that are okayed, giving permission without safety to exist. How about these, not without getting into the vaccines? What are those doing to your mind? Epigenetic changing real time. We've talked about all this stuff. What's the cause? I would be, everything is a conspiracy theory at that point. Because, see, you can't prove any of it. And yet any one of those could be a actual cause. Not the pulling of the trigger, what led up to it, to make the posts, to get the gun. Another thing is people, and I don't even know why I'm getting on this gun thing, a lot of complaints, I guess from people that are anti-gun. He could legally went to Nevada, this one in Garlic Festival, to come and shoot people at the Garlic Festival. Now, I tell you what, the Garlic Festival is a real peaceful place. So this is, in one regard, it really is kind of a shock. But what's the complaint? If the guy could legally go to Nevada to use it, the complaint should have been, to my mind, was, well, how come everybody else didn't go to Nevada and have a self-protection appliance with them at the Garlic Festival? It was okay for that guy to have the guns, or the pair, whoever it was, it doesn't matter. How come no one there took the responsibility to protect themselves? So I have at least a problem between how we walk into these conditions, how we allow these conditions with our apathy and our inaction and our expecting others to help us, and we never take responsibility, and we blame the one who didn't pull the trigger. I'm not taking a blame away, but we also don't know what caused that kid to do, or those, if it was the kid to do what they did. I don't know, and no one looks into it. Again, these are all used. These are just a new alternative in the world for you. Your way of life is being changed through all this nonsense. Right or wrong, actual or not, fabricated or actual condition. It's all being used, and nobody seems to want to stand up and do even a portion of what I'm asking people to do it better. So the FBI says that domestic terrorism is going to be those that advance conspiracy theories, and then it comes out and says that the media, mass, M-A-S-S-E-S, as masses media, got it wrong when they theorized about the connection with the white supremacy conspiracy. Which means that the FBI, whether or not it wants to tell you, agrees that masses media is a terrorist. It's a domestic terror. And so there's your notice. And it's not going to do anything about it, which is accessory for the FBI. As I've said before, the FBI is probably the premier domestic terrorist, from what I can tell. We got personal private experience with that through the mining district and their addressment of our chairman after we sent a notice to show cause that the government agent, officers weren't committing treason. You can't even ask the question. That wasn't conspiracy theory, folks. That's law process being worked out to make confirmations. They don't even like that. The FBI does not want the law to be asserted. It is the terrorist. It's making war on the laws of the United States at every turn. And we see that where it'll say domestic terrorism is the use of conspiracy theories. We all know who they're vilifying, but I want to go ahead and apply it. Apply it. And yet they will not say that masses media is a threat, is a terrorism. And this is a little different than the right to publish. See, this is the thing. This is treading on the dictum that you can't yell fire in a theater. Not law, and wasn't policy, but it's an idea. Why? The one reason why they want to encroach upon the First Amendment. Because if you look very carefully, you can do things lawfully, but you're not allowed to use those privileges, I guess, if you could say, or unalienable or even inalienable rights to an advantage to cause a crime. And that's the problem that you have to look at with this. So anyway, the FBI says the media was wrong. And the media was wrong because it said it created its own conspiracy theory relative to white supremacy. And I'm not getting into all that. That stuff, this is all just terms and words to get everyone divided. I'm looking at whether or not we address these things and how. Who are we the people, calling out, and how? You just calling them names, or are you identifying? You make your bullet point facts of cause, facts of evidence to create the cause that you're going to at least allege, if not perfect, in the evidence. If for what? Not a court of law, but a court of public opinion. And be that voice out there that counters all this nonsense, even the FBI itself. So put this in a nutshell. The masses media puts a conspiracy theory together and promotes it. And the FBI has said that conspiracy theories are domestic terrorism. Should be interesting for you to put together for yourself, and you start to present that in places, official places. And you don't just go blurt it out. You look for the proper state. My mind says, okay, you look for the proper place. When someone refers to a story in the media, and I don't mean you just argue amongst themselves. I'm talking in a place of decision that they're going to bring in something important, like, let's say, gun control. They're going to bring it in. You say, but wait a minute now. You're relying on a story that was done by masses media that the FBI says is a domestic terrorist, notwithstanding it's a publisher. And so you're using you're using what the FBI has declared as terrorism as a color of authority to interfere with our rights, whether they're inalienable or unalienable. And so here we go. We get the idea. I hope you get the idea how I approach some of this, just even to start the conversation on how do we start to address this. It's not addressing it, but it's creating the framework from which we will start to move. I say we, that's any one of us, and doing when we move forward to address certain things. Stop complaining about the fact of it. It's not a laughing matter, but it's like this sadness that I'm laughing. I don't know what you call it. Look at a whole bunch of people that go into a place rightfully not feeling that there's going to be a problem, and that day many people die. And not one was protected. Not one. And yet they complain about the legal ability to go to Nevada. Well, if it's legal ability to go to Nevada, then why didn't everybody else do that? And I'll tell you one other thing that really kind of, it was unsaid. I don't know. I didn't see too many stories. Again, I didn't focus on a bunch of this stuff. I look at it just enough to know what's going on, take an assessment, and keep moving. I got other things I think is more important until more people start understanding how to address all this. Is that garlic festival usually has cops crawling all over the place. All kinds of not just cops. I mean, anybody. It's a law enforcement in the government is usually crawling all over that place. How this thing even happened is pretty. I don't want to go to the point where it didn't happen. How it got away? How the kid got away with it is just phenomenal. And so here's the point: when you have that much official coverage, and it doesn't protect you, you now have the argument they can't, and your necessity says they can't preclude you from doing so for yourself. What am I saying? I want you to go out and show you that you can carry a gun? No, I want you to be stepping up to understand how to start protecting yourself wherever you go. I'm actually having to rethink right now as I see all this. We're coming in, maybe this is the time when they were telling us it's going to happen all the time, that maybe we have to gauge up now. And do I now go and have I'm still considering at this point, no matter where I go when, do I open carry? And I do that because to me it doesn't bother. I carry tight to my body. Where I'm at, you can cover part of it and be covered if it's on the belt. Because why? What have I told you about that? It's legal to cover on the belt because that's the official uniform of the cop. In other words, you're held to the standard of a cop, the military there. And it's been deemed that carrying as a uniform on the place that it's supposed to be creates an expectation it's there. I'm not telling you to do this. I'm telling you that's how you can carry tight to your body and not really advertise. Because I'm not an advertiser. I'd rather conceal, but I'm not going to go through the permission to go through it with it. So, but my consideration now is this killing is happening more and more like they said it was, like they planned, and it's working. Now, do we disregard that? And I keep looking at other people being not responsible to protect their own, and now I have to look at myself when I do that. Do we go everywhere now and protect ourselves? And when we find out we can't, or we're going to so-called get in trouble by some authority, we have to turn our attention to that. And we have to bring the ordinance, or we have to bring the notice, the policy even, that you can keep in your bag of law that protects you to be able to do that to protect yourself. Otherwise, you're a slave. You're subject to the whims of the system, and that system may be just as corrupt. If you think that's a question, no, that's a rhetorical hope that it's not. It's not. It could be as corrupt as it could be to want to hurt you. And I'm asking you all to reconsider how this is working. And yeah, it's not going to happen to you, but that's the last thing. The last thing through the mind of the people at any one of these Walmarts or whatever, all these stores, the restaurant you went to, the fast food joint. And so here we are. We got a place where the FBI will call conspiracy theorists the domestic terrorists, which just isn't new. This is just now they're going to call it out, and yet they look right at the media doing that and not make any arrests. Is a problem for you, whether or not you appreciate that, because you're not going to be treated with that consideration at all, are you? And here we do get to it. The FBI stating that media is wrong when it proposes a conspiracy theory about the shooters in the Garlic Festival, and the press does get the protection, though, when it talks about certain things. And this is what I wanted to point out. If you can situate this publication thing, this media thing, in a way that they don't have the right to do what they're doing, in fact, now you go ahead and use the FBI's absurd assertions. It's misapplied assertion as well, unequally applied, as the point to say that a conspiracy theory, someone who publishes a conspiracy theory, is not protected by the First Amendment. In fact, it's a terrorism. Now you're getting closer to going after Google and all that they're doing and everything else that's going on in the masses media. But the United States federal court exposes Democratic Party conspiracy against Assange at WikiLeaks. They found that Assange and WikiLeaks were publishers. They also found what a publisher can do. And it's apparently not conspiracy a conspiracy when it's the facts and the truth of what was handed to you by a third party. And they recite a case in this for those of you that are into this, for those of you that are being, again, your publications, if a blog, you can find the connection to the blog or the video log or all this, that you all become part of the press and connect up your free speech and your right of the public to engage in all this. Again, so you have all these connections you can make. You make a list, short list. You can even put them in the whereas form. I kind of don't like to hear that because a lot of people do it and don't understand what they're doing in that. But you can put it in that form, makes a nice bullet point list of what you have available to you that's being interfered with. That this case that was done in the Southern District of New York, Federal District, against Wikileaks and the founder Julian Assange. It was by the Democratic National Committee. It was dismissed with prejudice on top of it. Now, the attorneys are saying it's an important win for free speech. I don't know. We'll have to see, because if you see, you know the problem with Assange now. And remember, he's not being hit for being a publisher. He's being hit for excuse me, it just slipped my mind, relative to government leaks and, national security condition. So don't be careful. You have to go through that as well, and cleave that away from this. But the point is when they were giving out publicly known facts and information that's been disclosed or information from third parties, you're not an accessory. And there's a court case in this case. This is important to those of you that are doing blogs and all this as well. New York Times Company versus United States. And they talk about in this link, you want to put yourself together some sort of a rebuttal to an assertion that you're either not or can't be protected or can be censored. I'm thinking that these kinds of things can be working against people like YouTube, people like Google, whomever is sitting there to go against the press. And if the press is the only shield we have to hide behind right now, then hide behind it. I don't see a problem with that. If your caucustocracy is not recognizing all the other law, what else are you going to do? You're not in that control system. You better find yourself a place. You don't have to find every place. You just have to find the place that's protected. In this case, the WikiLeaks and Assange have been found to be protectable to a level that can't be brought back in. The dismissal is with prejudice. And so for those of you that are looking at all this, and this is not Assange's case, this has to do with this other case here, that you need to start laying out the bullet points on how the authority works. Don't make them up. Of course, it says you have the right of press, but see, they've eroded those with a lot of these Rule O law. And then I want to point out, because I talk about this, is where you're going to understand what I just said is the thing you have to do. But understand it for those of you that have listened to me and really applying this. You know that the New York court has no jurisdiction. I don't know why that cracks me up. So this is the way we have to go, but that decision's actually without law, without the substance of law behind it. And this is the whole other problem. There is no law right now. It's just this legal thing. Some people think that's semantical. It's not, but that's okay. You keep listening to the FBI saying one group of people they claim about so-called that when they deem something a conspiracy theory is a terrorist, and those that are in the mass media propaganda tools of the government are not, and you don't recognize that, that's another part of this problem, that you're not recognizing what I'm saying here relative to being able to parse through this thing and sitting inside the occupier's perceptions to make it through. And so this is a kind of a big deal here. I don't know how much to make it. I don't have time to really work out how it's working out. I just see the surface of some of these things. I particularly have not yet interested in protecting myself, let's say, as a publisher, as a press, or whatever. That hasn't approached me, so I haven't really looked into it. But you can bet I keep my mind and eye on this stuff and just keep it in the back of my mind. And then go through a list of things on if this was to attach to me somehow, how would I use these things? And again, I say bullet point because it confuses people to do more at this point. If you can handle more, then do more. But if you go to present more than bullet point to most people, the ones that don't understand, their eyes will roll black and they won't listen to you. They just don't get it. And those that do will use all your extra words against you. The courts themselves, the government itself, the attorneys themselves. So you got to find that most direct route to really settle down and explain in short sentences what you have right to do in order of the perception of the occupier, and then place your demand or cause or right or whatever you want to at the end of that. Now, if you want to perfect that more, you make those as attachments to a surface one sheet document, maybe 2-sheet document. You attach them, and only the one that's really interested will look anyway. But at least you've got up front on the first piece of paper or so, you have what you're saying. You have a way to, as I said, you have a word in your mouth. You have a word, an authority, an actual authority on a piece of paper. So the DNC tried to get around this and understand underlying all this. And remember the Russian blah blah that went on around this is the Seth Rich's condition, where he was the insider that saw it, that didn't like. I think the reasoning. I never talked to him, so I don't know. This is fourth and fifth hand. He didn't like the way the Democratic Party treated Bernie Sanders, and so this information got leaked out, from what I understand. And so WikiLeaks was taking a third-party piece of information that a publisher cannot be found as an accessory, which was an interesting attack. And the judge here, so-called, said, and he was a Bill Clinton nominee, as I look up real quickly and see this. This is a Democratic Party judge, if you will. He says, if you extend and open that up, you have no protection at all. And so he was right. And so reason is not something I'm attacking here when I say that the judge doesn't appear to have, by the statutes, doesn't have jurisdiction to make the decision. And I could be wrong if you can show, or they can show on the record. It won't be shown on the record, but if you did show me on the record, or they could show me on the record where the right of speech relative to WikiLeaks, which is not in the United States anywhere, whether it's within a territory of that United States District Court. And if you can show me that, then I'm in error. I'll correct that, and I'll be able to understand a little bit better. But the statutes say that there is no territory over there with which WikiLeaks could be interfering, and therefore that court has no, the establishment of the court has no jurisdiction, even if the judge has an Article 3 commission. And we talked about this as well. So you're just looking at one big conspiracy after another, no theory. And yet if you state it like I just said it, they'll say it's a conspiracy theory. Why? I've told you to go to the black and white. I guess that was the thing, and it just occurred to me now. Why am I even talking about that? Because if you don't go to the black and white, prepare the bullet point black and white up front of the authority to speak, they throw you in the conspiracy theory category and call you a domestic terrorist. They may do it anyway, but when you come back with the black and white, in other words, you're not just talking your opinion of the next great thing that's going to come down to save us all, and you say, wait a minute, now you're calling me this, you're saying it's a conspiracy theory that this and this and this happened. Well, here's the law that allows me to say it, and this and this did happen. Now you've used the color of your authority and power to call me names and defame me in order to try and get an advantage. That's unjust enrichment as well, especially if you can tie money to it. So I've just gone through it quickly. Once you may or may not apply, again, it's all hypothetical in my mind, but if I'm looking at this condition from how I've seen things approach it, and I talk to you quickly in the response, it's what's just going through my mind really quickly on things I bring up, concepts. Unjust enrichment, we don't talk about mine. That's an equity consideration. Go research about it. You develop the elements for it. Now you can use that in your weapons, your shield. You're a shield or a weapon or even a stalemate, whatever. It all depends on what you're up to, what you feel you want to get done. I can't really speak to all of that at all. I'm really handicapped a bit behind Woodshed this way, but again, you hear me for 10 years. It's not because it doesn't keep me from telling you stuff. All I can't talk to is the very specifics of any one of y'all's potential problem. Or not potential. I guess it's a potential problem even when you think you have it, because you might be able to resolve it pretty quickly. I don't know. And then it's not a problem. It was just a misframing of it. So with all this press and all this condition, the press has a power in the United States still, even in front of a democratically nominated judge. And go read what the judge says here, notwithstanding the jurisdictional infirmities here. Again, the occupier's treating us in a certain way. We're going to have to speak through that. I don't know. I haven't had anybody else explain to me how they have a better idea than what I'm coming up to tell you about. It's how I've been doing things for the last, well, maybe over 15 years now, very particularly looking at the black and white. Don't make up stuff within the black and white. In fact, while I say that, I need to address something, not to call you out, no judgment, but be careful. I think a set of statutes was put up last week or week before relative to when I said go look at Title 18 USC 241, 242, and a bunch of other statutes got put up as parallel statutes to enforce. Some of those were good. One, or at least one, I went back and looked. Be careful, read very carefully on the one, and I hope I get this right. I think it was USC 18 USC 35. Boy, if I got that. Look very carefully. All I got to tell you is read very carefully the statutes and do not omit any words. Any words you omit will invalidate that if you apply it wrong. When I suggest these statutes, it's not that you go write that down and now add that on a piece of paper. You go write the statute. I use the Cornell website. Go look at the notes. Those are really important as well. But you read the statute and read it for what it says, and then go back and see the heading and read it for how it applies. Just don't take my word for it in any one particular condition. You have to have all the elements that it says. So if you're looking at a statute that pertains to government officials, an employee, and you're not dealing with a government employee, and you're trying to assert a right for you, it won't work. And I see so many people trying to do that, and you're going to find out as you read more federal law, the laws aren't really, there's not many laws there that actually protect people. Those laws are there to protect the government. When you finally get the comprehensive overview, that should rise up, and I shouldn't tell you that, but I'm going to anyway. You should start saying, well, when I read it specifically, this doesn't apply. Well, where's the protection for me? When I read this specifically, it doesn't apply to me. Where's my protection? You're going to start to get the idea of what I've been talking to you about. You have to find your protections elsewhere. Doesn't mean that they're not there in the federal. I'm just saying the amount of statutes I've heard being used, and go read about them, aren't actually applicable the way and for the specific subject matter someone might be applying with them. And so I did see that. I wanted to call your attention. This is a real important mistake that's made. Read every word in these statutes. Make sure they apply to whom they apply to. And let me just give you one that's off the point of the looking at who to target. People use this, 28 USC 3002? Mine's not working there. It's totally off of what I was thinking about. It has to do with whether it says that the government and the agencies and instrumentalities is a corporation. That doesn't apply in all cases. So if you look at, again, this is how you go into the statute. You look for what it talks about. It says that it says that the United States is a corporation. Its instrumentalities are corporations, but you have to go look and see what that pertains to. And you'll realize when it pertains to a thing or two, and it omits others, then it doesn't pertain in those other places. And that's how I tell you how I was able to see it confirmed this chasm with mining law and land disposal. The corporation that corporate status doesn't pertain to the antecedent grants. And in that capacity, you're not dealing with that corporation. And so that would be grant law as well. So it conforms in a different way to prove the specificity that I'm telling you to apply these federal statutes. And actually, you might actually be shocked at how little protections you have. What you're looking at is a big bunch of codes that protect the government institution itself, actually. So unless you can figure out a way to fit your elements in, you won't have the doorway to open. And this is why, and this is one of the things you'll find for those of you that are looking at RICO, if you are, or how you can't just sue a federal employee or whatever employee for in their organized criminal syndicate for RICO. You have to have the predicate acts. And so, if you, like I keep telling you, one of them is if you don't have, like, let's say a letter going through the United States mail or can get it in the wire, by wire, you can't get a discussion from the government by wire. You can't even start a RICO action because the only way to get through is if they violate the mail somehow or the communication line somehow. So it's not about you being violated. It's about whether or not someone's unlawfully breached a system, an instrumentality of the government itself. And I've never really made that comment before to people, but that's what you're looking at with these government statutes. Why I keep telling you, you start looking at it the way I've been telling you, look inside what the occupier does to protect itself, but it's got openings. You have to fit yourself within those openings. It's the only way in. I mean, it's not even a question. In other words, if I don't have mail fraud, and I get it real quick, I make sure I get it real quick, I don't even have ability to continue. They can violate me left and right. I've got to figure out a different remedy for that. And that gets even worse, more difficult. It can be there. Like I've told you, I've sued a federal employee that was not supposed to be sued. You're not supposed to be able to sue these federal district forest rangers in a state court. And there's a way to do it. You just got to figure out the nice, clear path on how to get them to violate the law, and that there's no excuse for it. That takes a little bit to do, unless in this case it was so clearly outside the law, like obstructing a highway, ingress and egress. Just obstructing it as a federal employee, there's no excuse for that. And so that's the only way you get these guys. If you don't do it like that, you don't. You're one of the cases that gets dismissed, like this DNC people going after a publisher. And so put this in your pocket. At WikiLeaks, it's a publisher. It's a repository for information to be published. Assange is a publisher. How that affects the charges he's facing right now with the United States government going after him may be a little differently, but you can bring I don't know why he can bring this stuff in. I don't know why they don't listen to me on these jurisdictional things, but that's also another problem I have with all these people, whether or not they're setups for us. We put all this time and energy into all that stuff, and we forget to go to the basics that I'm telling you about how to develop for ourselves, for each one of us, not those celebrities out there. So WikiLeaks is a publisher. Assange is a publisher. They have protections. DNC cannot sue the way they sued. They can never sue now on those elements. In fact, if you go read through, you see how it's done, how these people make lawsuits that are not even lawsuits. They talk conjecturally instead of factually, something I'm trying to tell you over and over to stop doing. That's why I say make a short sentence on the fact of something. Don't try to tell me a story about it. And yet, we also know then we can pass third-party information. The publisher can't be hit as an accessory to accepting the information, and then they have their ability to publish. And they found this right to be very powerful because it keeps an informed populace. And this is the key that you want to look at as well. Don't disregard that reason the judge brings forward. I'll call him a judge. He has a judgment. The people are going to agree with it, and it's good enough. Right now, we can use that point, that reasoning behind it. It's to inform the populace, to keep the populace educated in how it's supposed to do its business and watch its business done. That's the key, one of the cornerstones of this place you call the United States of America. And it's also a way you can attack. If you got FBI saying that conspiracy theorists are terrorism in the mass media, and then comes out with a conspiracy theory that it puts on someone to defame them, and misdirects people's attention, and you can put that in a political context, they're not serving the public like they're supposed to. And we get a little bit of that when you see the licensing for televisions. They have to serve the public. It's one of the cornerstones for the protection. So you have to understand, you got to read enough till you find this stuff, and you make these lists of requirements. And when you can check all the boxes now, you start to move into the place that I've been telling you. So WikiLeaks is a repository of information. People contacted. Seth Rich contacted WikiLeaks. They gave some information. I don't know the story. I'm not privy to all that. I'm only looking at what people say. I'm looking at the fact and the silence over Seth Rich's condition. Well, he had to do that quietly and anonymously. So I want to bring up another story that moved this thing, transition this thing through, to show you that there's, to remind us that whatever you might think is anonymous may not be so at some time in the future, and we really have to start paying attention to how we will move anonymous information amongst each other, hopefully, here. If you start to understand this meshing of a status to protect us all, then you're going to have and understand that you're going to have the ability to bring your shield up in the first point, and you'll be able to forestall or forbid an encroachment into that in the first instance. Like I say, on taxes, where's the due process? If you got no due process, where they determined that you're a taxable entity, a person liable to a tax, what the tax was, make records and keep books, and where? If you never got that you've never got that due process, then it can't attach type of thing. The same thing here. They try to encroach upon you and presume you're not within the shielded provisions that now WikiLeaks and Julian Assange is for us disseminating our information outward. You're going to be susceptible to some of the, you're going to not have the record to be susceptible to something like this, where in the future hackers breach the FSB contractor and expose Tor de-anonymization project and more. SciTech, the hack company, was working on research projects for the SFB, Russia's intelligence service. But no, I don't think this is an attack on the Russians done it. I think they're actually looking to try and de-anonymize Tor. And so you read this story, it sounds scary up front. It sounds, they are working on it. But the interesting thing is that I don't think that when you read the story, what they found out was that they're not yet breaking it down. What they are doing as a government is trying to break it down to get at you. And so those of us that are, like I tell you, I don't get out much, I don't get around, I try to keep everything as low-key, and I don't know absolute encryption, I'm not that hardcore. But I try to go places where most of the stuff I do is encrypted. Even browsing is encrypted, at least the HTTPS, and then inside I don't put forms on the internet, I don't fill out stuff. I try to communicate with you all through encryption, like Proton Mail type stuff, that basic level. Obviously, it's not protection if you're a target, but generally that does now stay in the idea I told you a long time ago that you intended it to be private, not public. That's going to be the one of the first statements you're going to make, and then they intruded without warrant. That's where you get that little bit of protection, at least on the record, that most people don't put up. We see here that SciTech was a contractor to the Russian FSB, that was the National Intelligence Service for Russia. They're trying to figure out how to de-anonymize Tor traffic. What they did say is something that Tor Network Project already knows, is that they put a bunch of nodes in that were rogue servers. And I'm only bringing this up because I think we're seeing some of the evidence. If you can position one of the places to be will be in the publication, the publisher condition, the press, and you can see in that of the case, and you'll read it, what the points are. You want to keep those close to your heart, if you will. You want to put them on a short list. And you're seeing that there wants to be an intervention against all that, that if you can set up the first part, if they in fact ever break through, you're going to still have a bit of a defense against it. If you don't, you just become the fodder that they want to make known to the world that's helpless against a government that doesn't want free speech. And I'm not focusing on Russia. The United States is doing this too. In fact, there's a whole other dynamic going on in the United States. I really am more believing that Snowden was more of a, whether he knows this or not, he was there to release a lot of these things. And that gave, if you understand how this works, the ubiquity with all the intrusion tools gave the government cover to be everywhere without anybody's ability to know that the government's done it. And so this is a fascinating little point to find out. FSB's trying to hack it. What does that mean impliedly? It's not yet hacked, at least from the FSB, the third-party contractors' work. And you'll read some other things that are not yet hacked. In fact, you'll see some things were looked at but not actually followed through. And so if we're going to be going into the future, we see this WikiLeaks and Assange, who was international anyway. He wasn't even on the United States. It's another conditional problem. But even so, what the United States did represent in its district court decision here was that if you can, your intention to be connected up in private for a press to inform the public is, if you will, noble. It is a protected activity. I'm suggesting one thing you do is make yourself that way. Set yourself up in this world of Russian dolls, nested things. You look at the world, the elites do it just like this. I'm saying you do this in statuses. Instead of making corporations, you're making status shells. You eliminate some that are no good and you bring in others that are better. Again, in a world of crime, you only have better. You don't have perfect. Well, unless you're a government and thugs and you can chase down anybody and kill them that you want. But I don't assume that any of my listeners are doing that. So hackers breached a Russian intelligence contractor, found that they definitely are projects that are trying to make you more known to governments. And you need to take that into stride. It doesn't scare me at all. It says, okay, relative to the other case or the other article I read, that's pretty interesting stuff. We get to continue to do. What I've been telling you behind the woodshed is still reliable, confirmed again and again and again. And it's not something you would be fearful of. It's something you take very certain notice of, and you do certain analysis. You have very honest analysis about it, and you proceed. You proceed with that intelligence. And to tell you, again, this dichotomy between focusing on certain conspiracy theorists and not others if they're agents of the government, and then, again, my observation that we live in a military consequence under a number of different reasons, that is not what you understand. And I want to remind you all, when you look at the Libra Code and you understand what it's telling you, and international law tells me this, international provisions, international responses, the condition that goes on in the world is such that you're not told. Again, it's a spaghetti western. You think it's a move. You think you're living in the real world, and this is all just a false front to keep your confidence and to keep you from looking behind the curtain. You give all these analogies to keep you from looking behind what the setup is. And in a military occupation, many layers are laid out in front of you that you will never be able to see that it is a military occupation. And so don't think you can look a few layers deep and do some research and think you found it. That's not the way that's going to work. And I know that because I've had to go where I've had to go to start to be able to see I can get in behind it. I know where behind it is. Not many people want to believe that or agree with me or not, or keep tuned in long enough to figure out what that is or get specific on something so we can move forward faster. They would rather tune away, I suppose. That's because they're not certainly going to my Twitter account. They're certainly not going to the YouTube RLM. They're not going and grab vast numbers to them running to hear what they can do to protect themselves. They're like a lot of those people at the Garlic Festival. Complain about the guy legally getting a gun in Nevada, but not going to Nevada themselves to protect themselves at the Garlic Festival, knowing it was going to happen somewhere. There you go. Intelligence. So when you see the military acting to protect it, when you see somebody protecting the military to protect itself, and you knows them when you see them, folks. There's another act here. Notwithstanding the protections now, Intelligence Act is the current one coming. It's already been passed in the House. Will protect CIA agents who commit war crimes. That was in quotes. Who commit war crimes. Whistleblower Kiriakou tells RT. In other words, there's going to be an expansion on a 1982 law that just says that will make parameters on that reporting on the things of the government intelligence, what the government's doing, even after the death of agents, will bring upon you woe. It is to me a military operation to protect itself. The security of the operation. Go read the Libra Code again. And I keep saying that in my mind because you don't understand how. I know it's long to read, 157 articles or whatever it was, but there's really hard to evade that thing when you start or avoid it even when you start reading what the rules are relative to what's going on in the world and watching it play out. You knows them when you sees them. When they start protecting their soldiers even after death, they don't mean you well. Oh, yeah, they know national security, this and that and the other. I get all that. But when you look at the national security has now made you an enemy combatant, domestic terrorist, subject to indefinite detention, I think we have a different type of reality to consider. And on this, going down a couple paragraphs in this report, whereas the 1982 law protected agents who had served abroad in preceding 5 years, the new provision would apply to anyone working in a classified position with agencies even after their retirement or death. The provision's language was crafted by the CIA, who claim it necessary to protect agents and from foreign adversaries. That includes you. Okay? You're a foreign adversary. How do we know that? Well, we're just on the, I don't even know, I have it even up. I don't know where my stuff is right now. The tabs I put up, I don't even know where the stuff is. What you hear about the military now going to put surveillance balloons in the Midwest, but it's Southcom, who's supposed to be looking offshore, not onshore. And they use the drug war I made a comment to this on the Twitter, I think. They may use the drug war to cover the authority to do all this, using surveillance balloons. Well, take away the drug excuse, and what do you have, folks? You got no authority. You got no authority even on the drug war. But take the drug excuse away, and you got war authority. Go to Title 50. It's over and over and over, folks. I mean, I don't know what more to tell people. But the people would rather go listen somewhere else, and they don't have to listen to me. Once you get it, go tear it up, folks. Tear it up right, so you don't get yourself in trouble. We got every day to fight the war for perpetually. You know, when we didn't, you see the kind of thing that's going on. You got balloons in space. This is the kind of protections they're putting in to protect the service, the national security fraud. It's another fraud. You can clearly, to my mind, it seems easily, Vince, easily constructed in order to expose it. But nobody's really doing it. And I can say, I don't do it on the mass level, on the grandiose level. We do this necessities attack inside what we do with relative to the subject matters we go after. Again, like in the fire policies, it had necessity. They got to do. No, you destroy that. You can destroy that it takes a little more work, but it's there because of what they're doing is a crime. You just have to look clearly enough at it, critically enough at it to find out where the disconnect was. And to my observation experience, that disconnect is somewhere because they're always they're a criminal. They're always going to violate something. And you just have to look close enough to do it. Or watch how they stay inside. So the military, Southcom, is supposed to look outward off the coast. Again, you're all domestic terrorists. So they're looking inside. And no one challenges it. No one says, hey, we're going to now say that's a misappropriation of funds. We're going to enjoin you from doing that. You go ahead and take your balloons off and put them out over the Gulf. That's fine. But don't bring them up into South Dakota. Or anywhere else, even Missouri. That's not your authority. That's not your jurisdiction. When you see that happening, first of all, and you don't stop it, then what is your excuse? What's your complaint? And if you do try to stop it and they come thump you down or they give national security, then you know what you've been told is a lie. Why? You see the propaganda tool of the government called masses media giving the green light to do domestic terrorism on you. And when it stops being this dumb, right clear in our face, I'll probably have to stop talking because finally we'll have stopped it. It won't happen like this anymore. So they're giving protection to their soldiers. They do it to protect the service. That's just out of the Lieber Code. I mean, I refer to that because that's in the black and white you can read for yourself. That predates all of us. And I do that because I found out if we do all that old stuff, that antiquated stuff, it gives us the objective basis to deal with the new alternatives that are vastly unlawful. Treasonous, even use the treason, making war on our lifestyle, our laws, not the rule of law, the laws. The legal makes rule of law. That's rule of law and democracy. They speak nothing to your way of life. It's an international imposition by the Bar Association and agreed to by everybody who uses that system, that union, that labor union, essentially, a professions union, for advice and counsel. And so they're putting up balloons to surveil the whole center of the United States underneath this excuse of drug war, fighting drug war on a military agency that's supposed to be looking offshore, and no one actually pulls anything together, even to call it out. It's really kind of just phenomenal to me. But they're also we're going to transition it. Balloons are in the sky, apparently, more. And so this little story popped up, another thing happening. I find interesting. The players are still consistent. And I found, on the one hand, they just go ahead and blatantly use the war on drugs to turn a military inward. Totally inappropriate, invalid excuse. And on the other hand, you see when they're going to do this another type of attack, through the color of research, they're going to use balloons, but they're going to minimize their exposure. And so it's going to be, this one's actually going to be very hard. I don't even know, I couldn't find an in on this one to actually stop it, because when you read what they're actually going to do after the headline of this, they're actually going to be doing a very small experiment. There's no there's no reason for it because they have other things they could do. But this is telling you where they're going. Harvard scientists funded by Bill Gates to begin spraying particles into the sky in an experiment to dim the sun. Pretty big headline. I think this is a little bit overblown for the story, and so let's not get too wild, and let's look for what it is, where the government is using a completely invalid excuse of drug war to put the military inward. This Harvard scientist is going to get funded by Bill Gates, the same guy who says the only answer to global warming, a fraud, to impose upon the world is your death, is paying for this as well. Now remember, they've not admitted to actual geoengineering. That become a question to make the experiments. We reported behind the Woodshed and all this. Now the report is that they're going to be spraying particles. When you read the story, they're doing a very small experiment. They're actually, I think they said only like 100 grams of a chemical is going to be put in, a calcium something or other, and they're going to do some sensing and all this from dropping it from a balloon. This is not spraying this article plays on our mind about the persistent contrails, if I need to say that. They're stepping in very slowly on this thing. Remember though, they're already doing it in another way. So this is a whole lot of bluster. In this story, I found the story actually to be a little bit of a problem in how it tries to promote this, in trying to get people to come to attention, which they should, but not in a proper way when you read what they're going to do. But inside the story is really more the key of what's going on, who's doing it, and speaks to what I've been telling you on how someone what makes this important, how you will start to address it. According to the Nature magazine, Louis Bedsworth, executive director of California Strategic Growth Council. So here we have your first indication of who you're dealing with, these councils. A state agency, oh wow, there you go. There's your consensus, state agency consensus, like the Bar Association is no less. A council and a state agency that promotes sustainability and economic prosperity. You know, I have to interject every one of these words here. I'm going to do it. I don't have to, but I'm going to anyway. Sustainability is the UN agenda. This is the sustainable future we want, not you and I, but them. These people that are putting on an economic prosperity. I want to remind you that the Agenda 2030 says prosperity is what? Financial debt. Austerity and financial debt. That's shared prosperity is financial debt. And so that's what this state agency in California is promoting. Will lead a Harvard advisory panel. The other 7 members include earth science researchers and specialists in environmental and climate law and policy. Well, climate law doesn't exist. It's this international thing. Policy, again, is what they all do, because that's what the legislatures do. There is no law, actually. See, this is all set up for us. And you see there's nobody else involved but the consensus people. The outcome-based process is working to be able to agree to put this experiment into the air. And it's calcium carbonate particles is going to be, they say, spray. It's really just 100 grams or something. I don't know how they're even going to do this experiment with any legitimacy, when I know if they just went and looked at all these airplanes, they could probably already have an existing experiment ongoing that they could be looking at all this. So they want to diminish a little bit of this. They say these are the calcium carbonate is about 100 grams, roughly equivalent to the amount of food found in an average bottle of off-the-shelf antacid. So you see they try to diminish what they're doing. Well, they get you focused on this little thing Bill Gates is going to be paying for it. It's all consensus stuff. It's all the future we want, get you into buying into the greenhouse gas, climate change nonsense. But you don't realize they've been doing it to you with these not checking into an ongoing experiment. Even if it were legitimate persistent contrails, it seems to me that that's the particulates they should have been checking all along. And I said, if they get this wrong, the problem with this thing is not the truth. The truth is fine. Let's find the truth. But if they get the truth wrong, which we know that this climate change is a unproven hypothesis, the statistical relationships of which are what they base this thing on, which is all unproven. It's just a bunch of numbers. It's somebody's hockey stick, isn't it? Michael Mann made climate change, made global warming. It didn't exist. But this is the thing that this goes on. What if we get that wrong? What if the pollutants that we put up, these particles that we're already putting up, are enough evidence to show that if it's going into a diminishing cycle, as I've told you before, they predicted what happened by, 2030, we're going to hasten that onset. And so we're really not doing ourselves a favor one way or the other. I don't even have to take a position when I see this nonsense story relative to all the energy that's going to go out when I see an existing condition already ongoing that should have been the focus of the study. Then I see that what's totally insane is the fact we're not doing that study. We're fabricating new ones and thinking that 100 grams of calcium carbonate, something that's not in the atmosphere whatsoever at all, is going to give us any understanding of the actual condition. Which I'm going to suggest to you, don't forget it. All this stuff has all these little things in my mind that you got to be careful. We get our mind focused. Remember, we got this anomalous magnetic field going on. To me, that's a key and a critical factor that I don't hear too many people talking about. The anomaly, it appears even like the swarm satellites give us an indication. It's not 2 poles, it's actually 4. They're of varying powers. And they're splitting, and we're actually what our sensing devices are looking at the mean between the 2 strongest poles, whatever our compass might be pointing. That if that's the case, our field is not as polar as it was, and therefore we have anomalies in the field. It's not as organized. It's not like that nice bar magnet that we understand. All the magnetic fields are all the same, and they can act as a shield from the cosmic rays. All that's broken down. Now you probably have swirls and eddies and all kinds of stuff, circles all over the Earth because of this polar diminishment. So this study doesn't talk anything about that. And so there's a whole lot. I told you the models just don't do it. So if we get this wrong, folks, we're going to hurt people, I guess, is the bottom line. And Bill Gates wants to kill you. He said that out of his own will. The only factor we have here is population needs to drop. But remember, don't lose the fact that it's based on climate change, a fraud, and the future that they want. And you're sitting as crickets, not responding to it. And here I've been going for 10 years to explain who and how and what and the persistence that's required to develop these conditions, set the record up, and then go ahead and be the obstruction to it, while we also work on these people that are the infestation in our government institutions that ought to be exorcised. You heard that this council is a state agency, no different than the Bar Association. These people figured us out. They figured out our weakness in a Republican form representative government that was supposed to set up, and we were supposed to be vigilant to protect against. I don't know any other answer than we were supposed to. We have the responsibility to be responsible. Well, I'm a little bit amused, in a sad way, that everybody at the shootings will complain, even the one in Texas, will complain about the shooter having guns, and that they'll never have one on their own to protect themselves. As if the government's there to protect you. Well, they believe that, and it doesn't happen, but they'll blame the shooter for being able to legally go do something and exploit their irresponsibility, as far as I can tell. So here we have a condition that they're not going to be putting up. They're not going to be doing this big old spray project. And I find that really interesting, that they're not going to be doing big costs of jets and spraying and all this other stuff. Why? What would they have to see? If they did that, they'd have to go point out, we got the ongoing experiment with commercial airlines, don't we? But that would expose the fact that they're probably spraying, isn't it, in the fuel. So they can't go that way. No, they're going to do some they're going to get you to buy into the idea, and they're going to admit to geoengineering, but they're going to take a bunch of Tums and crush it up, throw it in the atmosphere. And they'll come up with the outcome they need in order to move to a bigger thing, and pretty soon, well, the ice age may hit. Let's put it that way. And what is going to be interesting, it may hit for France and not hit for Alaska. And I say that because I predicted we were going to get snow this year, and we didn't, but France did, and we're not too far away from the same place. So just the other side of the world a bit, isn't it? Right? So There's no predictability to nature. We just know she's doing her thing. If I want to be politically incorrect and name a gender. I wonder what they do with Gaia. How did they get gender correct with Gaia? Anyway, so here, back to the military, they watch out. They don't watch out when they're going to just violate the law in the military. In the case that they got to inch into a poisoning, a public poisoning that they're doing to people through Title 50 as well, and they want to get you to believe that the academia is doing something, they go 100 grams of antacid. And yet you look at another, you know them when you see them, same problem with the excuse, active duty U.S. troops now prison guards at Texas detention facility. It was reported last week the U.S. Border Patrol detention facility in Donna, Texas, had increased the role of its active duty U.S. troops previously ordered to have no contact with the migrants in the facility. Their new guidelines may result in a violation of 140-year-old law considered to be the cornerstone of American civil liberties, and that particular is the Posse Comitatus. But the point is that they're not too afraid to do it. So maybe Posse Comitatus is not either in effect or there's a new sheriff in town. He still knows them when you sees them. They're claiming that they don't have arms. That doesn't necessarily make them not a troop in the military consequence. And so we start seeing the encroachment. I call this out. I'm not going to get into the detention facility, all that. You can say, well, it's at the border. Well, is it federal territory? I think not. The border may be a port. That's a certain spot. So even when you get on the land, this doesn't apply. So if they're putting troops on the ground in a military capacity, even if it's observers, they're still, well, you're going to play that game in Syria too, right? See, the mirror can be done both ways. And so here's okay, it's indicative of a condition. Are you going to agree to it or not? Don't mess with Texas, they're messing with you. And I always find that interesting. Texas was carved out particularly in that proclamation that did not end the Civil War, remember? All this stuff to just keep track of, it's actually kind of funny. That's why I guess I'm laughing. And it's not very funny, actually. Now, moving over to you know them when you see them and protecting their own and the protection of the system and how you kind of hear things are ongoing, and yet you see these, again, anomalous behaviors, and I said take cognizance of the anomalies. They've been pushing, and again, a distasteful subject matter. I've talked to you more about how I've been involved with the exposure to my level to finding out that trafficking, if you will, pedophilia, child abuse was systemic. No different than these councils, state councils and bar association, or all agencies. Within the state agencies, they've used the cover of the state in order to commit atrocities. In this time, again, when you're looking at the system protecting itself, I guess is the theme here. How this kind of goes through. When you see a complete disregard and a color that sounds plausible but not when you look at it, you see one where they know if they started actually doing experiments in the sky that were acknowledged that really get people to take notice, but we're only going to be doing a bottle of Tums. And then in this one, hearkening back into the news that's going through that people have been enamored with, and I mean I know it's important, but not for myself when I've already known it's there. And I can't do anything about it, and I'm a guy what are we going to do about it? We can pass information around, or we can just acknowledge that we have a problem. And unless we can do something about it, we need to focus on other things. I haven't been too interested in these next stories of the pedophilia and all that, like the Epstein story. And this is important to look at, I think, in a way. Again, I'm trying to call people's attention not to look away. Take cognizance of it. It has to work its way out. Unless you can change something, then you jump in with both feet. If you can't change anything, take cognizance of it, but see how the system protects itself, and that it is protecting itself. A report came through, again, the system is soldiers protecting its system. 1,700 people indicted, arrested in massive nationwide human trafficking sweep. We'll get into the human thing. You know all about that. Herders here. The U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ, is cracking down on the multi-billion-dollar business of human trafficking in the United States. In June, 1,700 people are arrested nationwide for allegedly committing child sex and exploitation crimes as part of a nationwide DOJ initiative called Operation Broken Heart. Now, I want to just stop. You can go on and on and on. Now, this is all coming up at the same time with the Epstein thing, all of a sudden. What caught my mind is that when you go through this story and you read very quickly, who the 1,700 people were. I could not find any officials. I could not find anybody who was in a seat of decision. And I told you to watch out for that, and that's why I went looking for it. And another story pops out. Here's how prevalent sex crimes have become. Now remember, I did tried to do my documentary back in 2000. Well, I was preparing it in 2000 to 2004. That's when I got whacked, but not whacked terminally. So I guess to our good luck, if you consider I have everything to tell you, not necessarily on just this, but on other things. And I was finding out this was systemic then. And then we find out, you just look at the Catholic Church. You want to talk about systemic. And then they got a protective jurisdiction as well. But here's how prevalent sex crimes have become. And I noticed I wasn't really, again, I'm not interested in really the story for the story's sake. I'm looking for particular points of fact. And if you go through and look and read the things that they point out, you'll realize they don't mention anybody of any official notoriety. They don't expose anybody in an official office. And I say that with my particular view because that's who I was focused on. It was the system who was perpetrating this and allowing the condition through its agencies, through its officers, through its employees, through the Bar Association, through the judges, through whatever conditions of check and balance that were supposed to be done. It's all laid out. It's really a fascinating cancer. Again, so the system puts out a story for you to consume and agree to, that they're catching these people. And in fact, nobody who's actually running the levers of this machine are actually on the hook. Which we go back to Epstein, and okay, that's maybe someone's on him. So someone's no longer, he's not in someone's favor. And that's been the only way I've seen anybody in a seat of decision to be taken down. And how that doesn't roll out to expose the rest is an interesting threat. So, like I've already said, organized crime, the mafia just drools over this sort of power and control. And it's pervasive. But I just wanted to point out, the military protects itself from what it does. You look and see what the military does to people and abuse them in all the ways that it abuses them. And you see it here, but you don't see anybody in all of that that's of any note caught up. And my mind stopped. I started thinking about all the things I was doing back over a decade ago. All the officials that were involved with that did not get called out. And so they're not here really. I mean, one of the other things, they're not here to protect your kids. They're here to protect themselves. They're here to cause, here's 1,700 people, maybe scum of the earth. The point is, that's not all that's out there. And I guess the Epstein thing is pointing that out, isn't it? And you see all the people with the money and the contacts, they have the ways to keep avoiding the condition for a long time. Whether or not they get out, I don't know. But now we're also hearing the Hillary Clinton, the DOJ, the FBI working behind the scenes to make these sweetheart deals, right? The FBI is the biggest terrorist. And it's because they're feigning accountability and then pointing to the wrong people that are, again, who cares about a conspiracy theorist anyway? They had to attach that someone might believe it and actually carry it out. But that doesn't say that's the cause. That just feeds into what I said earlier in the beginning. What could be the cause? The government's not going to point out their pharmaceutical industry. Their licensees are no good. Their doctors are no good. They're all working to feed into that. They're not going to point all that out. The FBI's not going to come out and attack us when we want to say, hey, wait a minute, you got some officers in your departments of government that are committing treason. We want to confirm that, and they attack you. They're not interested. Again, this is just a military covering itself up. The military is the government. It's this in this case. It doesn't look like it. It's a false front, and many levels deep. You'll never really see it. And some of you agree with me. You've read the documents. You see how it works. I don't know if you really see what I'm saying actually either. These levels really are that deep. It's astonishing how protected this thing is from actually seeing it. All we're really responding to is the effect. That's why I say you know them when you see them. That's just an effect. It's not that underlying deep cause that is that thing. Anyway, so here we have it's just protecting itself. Given Epstein explains that there's some very high level people, well-connected, worldly types, involved that you can't get at. And then you only see 1,700 low-hanging fruit, and the government's touting that it's protecting you. You better look at who's saying that they're protecting you as a problem. They're not here to protect us. They're not here to protect our kids, our little goats. So here's a little story about that came up as we move this thing through. That's consistently telling us the story if we would just pay attention. And this is not enough. Once we see this is the real thing, we then have to rethink about what that means and then step back again and say, okay, now how am I going to deal with that? And one of the answers is to step away and maybe, in this case, homeschool. But that's not even the answer either, because this is systemic, and then you allow it to continue when you do that too. And so this is how difficult this whole shenanigans criminality that we call government has become is. The CEO offers to pay school lunch debt so parents won't have kids stolen by CPS. The government won't let him. Now we go through, I read this story about this thing that they were going to take your kids, your little goats, they're going to confiscate them for not paying for school lunch. A businessman steps up. For whatever his reasons were, altruistic or promotion, I don't really care. Because it brings up another condition, another thing that people should have stepped up to and really moved against, to slap down this school that would have even threatened to do this. Remember, child services involved. We just talked about this is the problem I was just telling you. It's systemic. This pedophilia thing is systemic. They understand how to keep themselves, make you think that they're doing real good, and behind the scenes, it's the dirtiest looking thing. You wouldn't pet a dog back in there. But somebody stepped up and said, I want to pay for all the school lunches. A millionaire CEO. To his credit, I really don't care. Tom Carmichael, I don't care what his reasons were. Colombe Coffee. I even gave the name of the Philadelphia-based coffee company. He stepped up, said, I'm going to pay off these debts. And one of these, this guy, Joseph Mazur, who's like this president of the district, said, no, we're not going to let you do it. And he had his own reasons. I wanted to point out something about Philadelphia and abuse. Remember, that's where the problem with Sandusky, I think wasn't it? In that area, and those judges, and the youth corps, and all that I told you, watch out at the universities of Penn State or whatever. Am I got the wrong state even? I mean, is this all the same stuff? This is an abusive place, this area. And it jumped over to the UK. This is all I told you this years and years ago until you see now it's this big old deal. It's systemic. And these people don't want to help your little ones. They're not serving you. They're serving themselves. And someone steps up to say, I'll pay the $22,000 in unpaid lunch bills. And this Joseph Mazur, president of the district, says no. Now, when I saw that, and then they turned around, as Mazur says, I'm still going to hold this debt against these people. I'm going to threaten to abduct their kids. That's a felony on multiple levels. Here's what happened to my mind when I read that someone offered, and maybe some of you listening who've done some research will already have anticipated this. And I put it in the Twitter as a response. I don't get anybody come back with this stuff, so I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. I know what it's supposed to be. Whether or not other people want to acknowledge it or be found out for them not knowing or whatever, or don't want to give credit to their own understanding of things, or not want to say, yeah, that's right, how we're going to stop this elsewise. I said, my point is when someone made an offer of payment to discharge that debt and it was denied, doesn't that pay the debt? Isn't that the payment that was tendered and denied discharge that debt? That's a rhetorical question, folks, because if you go to UCC, you're going to find out that it does. So I put a Twitter, it says, how is the debt, in quotes, not discharged upon rejection of full payment tendered by Todd Carmichael and La Colombe Coffee? How is Joseph Mazur not committing multiple felonies to threaten kidnapping under color of authority? Where's his title to the little goats, and to trade them to strangers for debt? Now, I know I talk a little quick, but I hope you pick up a couple points here, folks. There's so much wrong with here as questions, even if I didn't know better. That you knows them when you sees them. This is the type of violations of the law that a system that's entrenched to harm people commits in the face of everyone over there, and no one says boo about it. Did LaColumbi Coffee get back in touch with me? Thanks for the idea, or no, thank you. No, that's not the way it works here, or whatever. No. Does the Todd Carmichael, who's the CEO, come back and tell me go away behind the woodshed? We don't need your kind. No, nothing. Crickets. And yet there's a code that says payment tendered to pay for a debt discharges it upon refusal, on rejection. What is this, folks? Who's harming our kids now but us? We don't even assert the law that's there. Even the basic code's there to protect us, which I've been asking everybody to start doing. I don't like having to, but I don't know what else is going to protect us from these people. You have someone that really has it out for people because of his sense that they're shirking a debt. I get all that part, but that's not enough to come abduct kids or threaten them or families or any of that stuff. These people are supposed to be helping your sons and daughters to be educated in the most innocent place. Yes, I know about all that other stuff, and I'm talking about that. That's a slightly different problem, but it all points to the same abuse, child abuse, doesn't it? They're willing to abduct the future child slaves into this system over there in Philadelphia. Sicker than sick. And no one can use the most basic uniform commercial code to pay that debt off where it was a tender to payment was rejected. Even a CEO of $1 billion coffee company? Are you kidding me? How pathetic are we as a people? And then it's no doubt why we see Philadelphia the way it is. I guess I'm getting on Philadelphia a bit here, you people over there. Isn't that all? Was that the cracked bell there too? Maybe that was it. Is that the same place? I don't even know anymore, folks. I'm becoming less and less caring about where things are. It seems like this big old massive, big old heap of, well, just a big old heap. A big, stenchy heap. No matter where I look, people are so helplessly and pathetically helpless to everything. And yet my first thought would seemingly answer the problem. Why hasn't it, folks? And if it did, why isn't there communication back? Not, oh, look what, okay, you offered the answer. No, to let other people know that's how that works. And do what? Send the message to people, abusers like this Missouri guy. Resign. Get out. You don't have the right to do what you did. You don't have the right to threaten to abduct our kids, and we are demanding better. And we can do that everywhere. Why don't we do that for ourselves? To me, this is, again, we aren't an informed populace, and we don't care to inform or cause the information to be spread that would inform others. And I'm, again, I don't know more than what I read here, the quick little stories. But anyway, you talk about the code, you talk about understanding, you want to know the Constitution. Even the UCC, I've told you I have problems with it, but if you go and read it and understand what it's supposed to do and put it in its place, it's very instructive. I've told you exactly how you go use it for other things. In this case, very simple answer. And that CEO didn't respond with it. No, they're going to work it out. When that code was sitting there as a notice to this Missouri guy, and he tries to press it anyway, he's committing multiple felonies, should go to jail because he's threatening to abduct your sons and daughters. And I don't care that the school system's an indoctrination center at that point. That's not part of the list of things that are the harm. And so for your all's sake and what I think about, that doesn't make the list. I don't go off wax eloquent about my opinion about the school system. The black and white says the guy was on notice that he didn't have the right to do it, and if he did reject, that eliminated the debt. And his next statement saying he was going to continue to put the pressure on those mothers and fathers out there that didn't pay for whatever reasons that they didn't pay was a felony. Multiple felonies, actually. I don't know why he wants his cash. I don't know what he thinks people are doing. I don't even know that what people are taking advantage of, that he might be, this guy might actually be correct at some level that they shouldn't be. There's a different way to handle that. And I told you that if this is a debt and they were going to do it lawfully, they had to go to court and establish the debt. The debtor would have had the right to go through federal law and the Federal Debt Collection Practices Act. That's why they don't do it, because they have to justify all this stuff. And so anyway, they don't want to get mucky feet for it. I get that, but that's not going the law just to deny the law at the other hand and threaten your little ones with it. Whatever. Put them in a pedophilia system. Phenomenal to me. And again, I don't know. It's not surprising why we have the kind of system that hurts people, and the Epstein thing becomes something. Look at all the lack of self-respect people have in systems like this as well. It's endless, the psychological harm that's on us as well. But again, as I've told you, it's the bottom line. This guy's looked at this for whatever reason. He wants to teach people a lesson, but he didn't do it within the authority that is quickly noticed if you understand even the most basic UCC. But it is about that bottom line, and we see that. We know the system for what it is. It's a military occupation. One of the main things that sustains it is the bottom line. Yeah? It's just the bottom line. This is a commerce system that's taken over. And we know that it conforms everything into commerce. Trafficking is commerce, folks. When you're protecting the so-called elite, the highest placed decision makers, that's commerce still. It's still trafficking. You just aren't in a position where you've allowed yourself to get at them. And they've created systems to block you out, not to the low-hanging fruit and not to your sons and daughters. You don't care about protecting them. No, you'd rather ogle and goggle over the Epstein thing. And yet you turn around about what's going on in your sons and daughters, and you think you're protecting them. And I'm suggesting to you there's a way to properly protect, and none of us are doing it. And I say none of us, including myself, because I don't know where I've failed. We do so much well and right that hasn't, whatever we're failing hasn't yet come to task. So I figured that's something to know about too. But Big Pharma admits measles outbreak and subsequent media hysteria made them massive profits. Now you tie the fact simply that these measles outbreak and then the propaganda to get your vaccines with a product that the government has not safety tested will make an abuse upon your little ones. The biological response of the body of your son or daughter to that invasion is not tested and checked, is unknown. And they come out and they admit that they set this stuff up for the takedown for profit, and I haven't heard more coming out about this. It is a fascination to me at one level. It just brings me back to, again, the self-inflicted wound. No one wants to really hear about this stuff. No one wants to stay tuned in long enough to figure out how to protect themselves. Everyone wants to make an excuse how involved it all is. Well, that's the nature of the mafia that we're dealing with, the organized crime. It's pervasive. And you don't stop organized crime without effort. Big Pharma admits to making money when the measles outbreak, and you found out a lot of those measles are caused by the vaccine. It's a self-perpetuating problem. There's many people, I'm certain, known behind the woodshed and the listeners behind the woodshed, you've probably understood some of this. Now, you don't understand the depth because I don't know of many people that actually do, and I'm not even claiming that I do. I've seen enough that if you go to those documents and the proofs of things, that starts the process of being able to expose it. Not that you just know that study's there. As I've showed and point out to people, you have to take these studies in a particular way and through a particular process to start become effective with them. Very few will do that for sure. But Big Pharma admits the measles outbreak and subsequent medium hysteria made them massive profits. And so maybe we're looking again at the media being the domestic terrorists, because what they hyped was what? The conspiracy theory of anti-vaccination, didn't it? Now, I don't think that necessarily that what I'm saying today, put together the way my mind says it can put together, would be the answer. But I'm saying, I believe, at least, what I've told you today about how this works relative to who the real domestic terrorist is and how to develop the case for that, in a short sentences, is a very big beginning steps, foundation to make in order to start to turn this thing around. I keep telling you it's about the bottom line. I keep telling you they win coming, they got you coming and going, and they make a buck either way. I learned this about the legal system a long time ago. And I guess if you don't appreciate how this subtlety is, it's not part of the equation. And see what I say when I'm saying that, I'm saying because I know that's part of the equation, what I do and the things I decide to do don't allow them to take on either direction, either on top of it. And so we can be led by the nose, a ring in our nose, an accessory to the crime against us, or we can swim really fast because we saw a light in the shadow above us. We don't want to be eaten by the buzzard, or whatever. We can flee from all these things, run to and fro, however we're told by the media, or we can sit back and say, no, okay, here's another proof. It's all about the bottom line. They got people coming and going, and they're making dollars, and the bottom line is my little one or myself or my family is in harm's way. What am I going to do? Where am I going to set in to stop it? Now, if you're one of these next people, you probably don't care. You are what you see. Lowbrow TV lowers IQ, increases disinformation susceptibility. See, here we go back to the so-called conspiracy theories. Here comes an effect of a cause that's unidentifiable, which we could make a list for. And you say, well, I don't do TV. I don't either, folks. But we do have the Internet, and that's probably the lowest IQ. Lowbrow. The lowest brow is the Internet. Increases disinformation susceptibility. This is what they're creating. This is the fertile ground in you they're creating. And I'm going to say they want to point out this TV. They didn't mention the Internet. They didn't mention the technology around it. Remember, silent weapons are quiet wars. They don't even your society, the way it sets up, is a low brow condition. It doesn't rise above mediocre, folks, and we haven't driven it higher. And that is on us. It's that this propaganda is a terroristic tool. And the FBI just called it out. And I thought that was fascinating that you could reconstruct that admission by the government to point out in a short sentences how you were going to go ahead and pull through your necessity authorities to correct the matter. And you at least at that point start pushing against that national security imperative, which is a lie. Thank you for being with me today behind the woodshed. Grimner, thank you for what you do at reallibertymedia.com. And Jules over at UCY, that you simulcast, and Sound Minds at YouTube, and all y'all that post after, thank you for all that, and the downloads. And I'll remember it's about the downloads. Give me a couple hours to get you the right thing. I think I stayed on most of all today. I didn't notice it go down. Didn't see any notices. Thank you very much for being a part of making that change, folks. It's not going to happen on its own. I mean, really, it's just not going to happen. I hope you can just jump in, pick something, and be the thing that doesn't exist. You're the unique part to this, each one of us. And don't be gullible. Look through it. Don't disregard good things, though. That's the other thing. And I'll be with you next week. Tech diffs or nature willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.